Okay, here's sort of part 2 of the lecture with existentialism. This is more specifically aimed at Albert Camus and the absurd. I've created a little PowerPoint for you. So, you will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life. Just pause and ponder that quote a little bit. You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life. Camus, not a big fan of philosophers sitting around, musing and pondering life. If you're not living, if you're not out there living, if you're just thinking about it, you're actually not living. So let's learn a little bit about his life so you can understand the background of his book when we start reading it eventually. Born in French colonial Algeria in 1913, he was a product, I guess, of the Victorian imperialism, and he saw a couple of crazy things in his world. His father was killed in World War I in 1914. At the same time, because of that, and around that, he was living in the, not squalor, but in a small apartment. Okay, maybe squalor. In a small apartment with his mother, brother, grandmother, and paralyzed uncle. They experienced extreme poverty. He worked particularly many jobs to attend the University of Algiers before, but then he was racked with a case of many cases of chronic tuberculosis, forcing him to drop out of school. He became a political journalist for an anti-colonialist newspaper, focusing on the poverty of Algeria. This led him to relocate to Paris in World War II, and he became a leader for an anti-German resistance movement. He was disillusioned with religion, joined the Communist Party, examined the role of Christianity and Hellenism, and this goes back to our modernism lecture, where we talked a little bit about how the times, all the negative things at the times, forced people to question, and even in his own personal life, he found a lot to question. Wartime in Paris spawned the concept of the absurd, his concept of the absurd. Life to him had no rational redeeming meaning. That didn't mean don't live it, it didn't have inherent meaning. As a result of the horror of the Nazi regime and unprecedented slaughter, he kind of came to the conclusion that moral order has no rational or natural basis. Things were going crazy, and what people had thought of as normal and real and true just got totally transformed at the beginning of the 1900s. Opposition to the rationalism of classical philosophy, like I said in the opening slide, people were seeking universal truth, and he didn't buy that, because to him, and people like Nietzsche, there was no universal truth, and it was all via individual perspective. Basically, the definition of the absurd, or the idea of this, is a human need for meaning is greater than the ability of the universe to be meaningful. So we're searching for something that can't be given to us. And it's that feeling of never being able to attain that truth that creates the absurd. So hence, all philosophical positions are absurd. We're searching for the truth, we're never going to find it. And I made this little weird diagram for you to try to explain it. So it's basically the juxtaposition of two incompatible ideas. You have man who expects and desires to find reason and meaning and unity in the universe. I know I do. And then you have this universe that's providing you with nothing but meaningless phenomenon. Because how could it be meaningful that the Nazis, did so many atrocities, or that his grandfather got paralyzed, or that he had chronic tuberculosis when he tried so hard to get into school? So there's lots of things that it just seemed like a disconnect, and that little space in between the wanting and the not getting, that created the absurd. With the absurd, there's no need to rely on any claims to know that you know anything, to say that you know anything about the world beyond what is given to us. So our experiences, moment to moment. In our modernism lecture, we talked about man is memory. If we don't have our memories and it's not our perception, then really what exists? And here is a quote from Camus. But what is happiness except the simple harmony between a man and the life that he leads? That's it. We got ourselves and how we function, how we lead our lives. Yes, we want answers. and the world gives us none, but we don't want to overcome the absurdity because there's no way to do that, but rather embrace it. So this is a little hard to wrap your head around. The absence of hope. How do you embrace the absence of hope? How do you embrace a continual rejection by the universe? How do you embrace a conscious dissatisfaction? It is the dissatisfaction that we should accept as a part of this paradox, and I'll go on to explain that. So, is it a futile, pessimistic chaos of life? Instead, according to Camus, we need to learn all over to see, to be attentive, and to focus on our consciousness, the moments that we experience. We need to turn every image and idea into a privileged moment, one that we are lucky to be living, instead of fretting about what it means or how could this be or how could this happen to me. And this idea is why the having God be there explaining, like, oh, it's because it's in God's plan or whatever. It didn't make sense to him because at that time, nothing really made sense to a lot of people. And some people did turn to religion. And I'll explain, it's not that he didn't believe that there wasn't a God. Other existentialists believed that there was no God. Nietzsche as one of them. But he himself believed there was one, but he like Kierkegaard, said that during life there's no way of understanding who God is or what God is. So anyway, so rather than getting upset, we have to live every life like a privileged moment. We need to find value in this life, find value in our freedom, the freedom we have to live those moments, our passion that we can grab onto, and our revolt against that sort of unmoving universe. We have the will to do that. So that's what we have to embrace. But how? We need to face life with, according to him, of course, this is not me preaching this is Camus. We need to face life with a courageous humanism, as humans and the artist at the center. This is how it overlaps with modernism. Truth is found by subjective intensity of passion. Whatever you do, do it with passion. And people like American romantics, like Ralph Waldo Emerson, for example, thought the same thing, that foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. So even if you change your mind tomorrow, it doesn't matter. Do what you're going to do and do it with passion. The experience of this absurd is the proof of man's uniqueness and the foundation of dignity and freedom. That's how Camus saw it, that's what makes us unique as a people, or as a race, I guess. Not even as a race, as a animal. The concept of the absurd hero is something that we're going to be looking at with the Sisyphean myth that he uses. So you have a literary figure who comprehends the absurd, questions the absurd, embraces despair, and then that's it. And it, one might think, wow, embracing despair and the absurd, this seems so sad. Like, I guess maybe all existentialists are prone to suicide. Not the case. As an action, suicide as an action is something that the existentialists abhor. If you create your own meaning and you want to destroy yourself, you therefore become meaningless, and that's cowardly to them. It's cowardly to not accept the freedom of choice and responsibility for your actions. And we're going to see this absurd hero and process of acceptance with Meursault, our protagonist of The Stranger. Does God exist? Again, Camus does not deny the existence of God, nor that there is no meaning in life, but instead claims there's just no way of knowing. Can one only be a saint if God does not exist? That is the only concrete problem I know of today. So ponder. And again, I'm not preaching this. This is simply one part in time of a very turbulent part of European, really worldwide confusion, especially for people like Camus and Sartre and some other people. So, what became of Camus? We may think that this absurdity is a bit absurd, but I'm just kidding, because it's not really. Camus was not morally indifferent. He, unlike Meursault, who you'll see, the lack of a higher meaning should not lead to despair. Rather, augment faith in man's dignity in the face of a cold and indifferent universe. So, embrace man, essentially. His literary successes are The Stranger, Myth of Sisyphus, The Rebel, The Plague, and The Fall. He did win the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1957, so consider that date in history and why that may or may not have been significant. I'll give you a hint. It was significant that he won that award at that time for his ideas and all those things that we outlined, those historical components that we outlined in the modernism lecture. The Demise. Albert Camus died in a car accident in 1960, but he wouldn't want us to have felt badly for him because it was the only certainty in life. You know, you live and you die, and you'll get that sense from the opening scenes of The Stranger as well. So I'm going to leave you with this quote. The world is never quiet. Even in its silence, eternally resounds with the same notes in vibration which escapes our ears. As for those that we perceive, they carry sounds to us, occasionally a chord, and never a melody. So ponder that. Look over your notes. See if you have any questions for tomorrow. See ya.